Hi, this is Caroline Montgomery. I am going to be presenting for Dr. Sujay Cho, myself, Jae Hun Shin, and Ki Jung Roo on collaboration between special educators and school psychologists. So, an introduction to our project. Special educators and school psychologists, we know, are critical figures in educating students with disabilities, and they are each a critical piece in effectively addressing the educational needs of students with disabilities, respectively. So, as special educators in their roles as teachers and in the classroom, and school psychologists in their role in assessment and intervention processes. And the collaboration between these stakeholders ensures that students with disabilities can access their entitled appropriate education as is mandated under IDEA. So it is critical that these two parties are involved in the process of supporting students so that they receive the appropriate services. Through collaboration, teachers the as well to acquire multiple perspectives and expand their own intervention skills as they are the ones who spend much of the time with students. And this would go beyond the typical IEP meetings, which are designed to counter a lack of communication. But as we'll speak about a little bit later, could be seen as sort of a more reactive and less proactive method of collaboration. So yeah, IEP teams typically meet on a prescribed timeline or to discuss student progress if issues arise. So as I was saying, there's sort of a missing proactive piece to this collaboration for serving students. And that was sort of part of the inspiration for this project is looking at ways to find out what is efficient and what can come of collaboration before the IEP meetings even take place. Um, this also means that IEP goals from the various professionals tend not to inform one another. With a lack of collaboration beforehand, the goals tend not to play off of each other or work in conjunction towards the greater progress of the students. And for greater collaboration would foster IEP goals that would be potentially more meaningful for students. Contrastingly, it's been found that informal conversations about students' progress should actually be taking place daily for students' benefit. In 2013, a study recommended, in fact, that at least 1 hour per week of co-planning educational services should be aimed at students' needs and how to offer increased opportunity for learning. So that there should be a 1 hour sort of proactive collaborative session on a weekly basis. So our study to address this lack of collaboration between the interdisciplinary personnel who play a role in students' services, specifically special educators and school psychologists. The purpose of our study is to develop an effective interdisciplinary collaboration strategies between special educators and school psychologists at the pre-service level. So we looked at students who were not yet working in schools as graduated from their programs. They are still in graduate school working on their degrees to become professional special education teachers or bilingual school psychologists. We facilitated collaborative conversations between these students to discuss the nature of their professions and their ideas regarding effective interdisciplinary collaboration. And they participated in monthly 30-minute conversations or dialogues that occurred virtually, so over Zoom, and they were transcribed, which went along with several courses and seminars, which they all took together, where we brought in speakers on various topics related to collaboration to sort of foster some of those conversations. And as I said, the conversations were recorded, transcribed, and we analyzed them to identify emerging themes. And so the participants, for participation in this work are receiving financial supports provided by a federally funded personnel preparation grant. So this study happened within the context of students who are receiving funding from a grant called PACS. And so this is related to some of the work required of them for receiving that federal funding. So we had 31 student pairings, which was made up of a fairly equal number of students in either special education or bilingual school psychology programs. Over 90% of the participants were female. More than 90% came from culturally or linguistically diverse backgrounds. And except for one, they were all the students were in their 20s or early 30s. So our results, overall, each pair reported that they really enjoyed these dialogues. They felt like they learned from each other a lot. The reactions were very positive overall. They felt they learned about different disciplines provided by the stories and real life examples. So the students came to the graduate program with varying levels of fieldwork experience or in-school experience. So a lot of them spoke to feeling they really benefited from just the chance to sit down and talk to others heading into similar yet different professions from them and to learn about their experiences. Similarly, they felt they provided emotional support to each other and they appreciated that. They emphasized the importance of working together as a team to optimize the outcomes for all students. So they really thought that that teamwork made a difference for really all students because of the outcomes of the conversations they had. They took the opportunity to share resources and they discussed how to maximize educational benefits for students with disabilities. The participants, in terms of their understanding of collaboration itself, we also looked at that sort of separately. They felt that collaboration definitely is important and beneficial, though a lot of them admitted that it felt somewhat overwhelming. The idea of different perspectives and finding middle ground can be overwhelming. They acknowledge that it is going to look different in a virtual learning environment versus an in-person learning environment. They spoke about how students benefit from school personnel's collaboration when all of the stakeholders end on the same page. So if the collaboration is successful, essentially, that students would benefit from that. The collaboration looks differently in different educational settings, virtual versus in person, but also thinking private schools, public schools, charter schools, etc. Parents can present difficulty in collaboration process, some of them mentioned, and that they'd experienced sometimes parents who hadn't recognized the need for the school to collaborate and for the parents' participation as well in that collaboration. School personnel tend to be limited with availability and time for collaboration. That was mentioned quite often that simply finding the time to do this work was a concern of a lot of the students. But that it is a great tool for school personnel, but also for the students. You can use this kind of collaborative teaching for them as well to teach them how to disagree with each other and come to thoughtful conclusions as a group. So several themes emerged reflecting the students' interest in examining methods for the following four topics. The first of which was increasing student motivation. A lot of students were interested in discussing that and thinking through ways of fostering student motivation. The second is fostering parent and guardian involvement. And then third is implementing socio-emotional curriculum. And then finally, designing effective differentiation. So how can teachers better serve all students through differentiation, but still being time efficient and generally efficient in doing so. So we pulled some quotes here to highlight how the students collaborated on these various topics of interest. So in regard to increasing student motivation, students spoke about how students have motivation in one area, but maybe not another. And they discussed the reasons perhaps that students may feel unmotivated in particular areas in comparison to others. They spoke about how teachers who are really motivated to learn and really passionate can affect students' motivation. They spoke about the emotional aspects of motivation and that we can all thrive off of emotional connections and that that really affects everyone's motivation. Then, in terms of fostering parent guardian involvement, conversations revolved around thoughts on how teachers could better involve parents in the Common Core language and material, understanding that much of the academic curriculum taught now looks significantly different than what parents may have experienced in schools. They also discussed how, and when we're thinking of parent involvement, we have to remember that every parent is different and every parent's method or mode of involvement is going to look different. And that one good strategy they came up with was asking upfront parents' preferences for communication. And then when it came to socio-emotional curriculum, some of the topics, some of the themes we noticed was talking about how in schools it seemed there a lot of them had the experience that where there was one teacher or someone who was sort of a go-to for socio-emotional teaching. They spoke that a lot of teachers use books. And then also from this second quote, you can see just the learning that was involved in these collaborative conversations, um, where one student mentioned that they wouldn't have thought about anti-bias work as being a part of socio-emotional learning, but upon more thinking about it, they realized how it could be incorporated. So I think this is a great example of how the collaboration for most of these students was a successful learning process. And then finally, for designing effective differentiation, they spoke about every student works differently and every student needs a different type of work to learn, and making sure that students have the needs for their learning style or the supports they may need to learn the best for them. And just how different student perspectives may perceive differentiation, um, and other themes in that vein. So finally, the findings from the study highlight some possible avenues for clarifying spaces for further support of the collaborative efforts of special education teachers and school psychologists. So the hope with this study is to show the need for more collaborative efforts between important stakeholders, specifically special educators and school psychologists when we're thinking about students with disabilities, and that there is a lot of room for that collaboration, and the learning that can happen between these two parties is huge and really benefits both them as professionals and the students. Also, it appears that special education majors contributed to the dialogues a bit more than the school psychology majors, which was interesting. And most of the special education majors work in full-time schools, and so they just may have had more experience to share with their partners. And finally, the dialogues were rather superficial. So for future research, we conclude that participants should be given focused topics and encouraged to have in-depth dialogues with their collaborator in another discipline. So we hope to find ways to make conversations between the students go further in depth and really get down into the nitty-gritty a bit more to really practice those skills of collaboration and dealing with multiple perspectives and finding conclusions together. And that is it for our presentation. We'd be happy to answer questions about the study. Please feel free to contact any of the authors. Thank you so much.